Let's talk about love. And not just any love, but the kind of love that's been sold to us, packaged, and sometimes tragically mislabeled. We're going straight to the source, the razor-sharp mind of Simone de Beauvoir, a feminist philosopher who dedicated her life to dissecting gender dynamics. What she said, and what few truly grasp, is this: love does not liberate men, it domesticates them. Now, let that sink in for a moment. This isn't just some casual observation. This is the woman who helped lay the groundwork for modern feminism, suggesting that romantic relationships, the very thing we're told is supposed to elevate us, might actually be a kind of cage for men. She effectively compared the process to a slaughterhouse, where men, often unknowingly, willingly queue up to be butchered. It's a stark, almost brutal image, but one that demands our attention, because it speaks to a hidden truth many of us feel but can't quite articulate. Picture this, because you've likely seen it, or maybe even lived it. A man falls in love. And I'm not talking about that fleeting, dopamine-fueled infatuation you get from endless swiping on dating apps. No, I mean the kind of love that goes deeper, the kind that fundamentally rewires his entire nervous system. It's the kind of connection where he wakes up, and his very first thought, the quiet hum beneath everything else, is of her. He starts to subconsciously, or even consciously, rearrange his entire life. His ambitions, his long-held plans, his vision for the future. They all subtly, or sometimes drastically, shift to make room for her, to fit her perfectly into his narrative. He believes, with an almost religious fervor, that this love is different. This one will defy the odds, it will stand strong against the cold, hard statistics of relationship failures. It will bypass the quiet betrayals and the slow, insidious decay woven into the very fabric of modern relationships. He believes it's his forever. Then, inevitably, the scene plays out. One evening, maybe over a dinner he paid for, perhaps with that faint, unsettling sense that something is off, she looks across the table, takes a breath, and says those infamous words, "I need to find myself." And just like that, with the casual detachment of someone returning a sweater they no longer want, it's over. The man who, just moments before, had meticulously built his entire identity around us, around this shared future, is left with nothing but himself. But it's a self he no longer recognizes. It's a hollowed-out version of the person he once was, stripped bare by a love he thought was his foundation. This, my friends, isn't some rare, tragic anomaly. It's not just bad luck. Sadly, for far too many, it's the rule. Simone de Beauvoir, that razor-sharp philosopher, she didn't just study love, she dissected it. She looked at it like a coroner examines a corpse, meticulously revealing every hidden fracture, every underlying cause of death. She warned us way back then, in her seminal work, The Second Sex, the day when it will be possible for woman to love not in her weakness but in her strength, not to escape herself but to find herself, not to abase herself but to assert herself. On that day love will become for her as for man a source of life and not a mortal danger. That quote, on the surface, sounds like a promise of liberation, doesn't it? A beautiful vision of balanced, healthy relationships. But here's the deeply unsettling truth that de Beauvoir, I believe, would see playing out today. Modern love hasn't truly liberated men or women. Instead, it has, in many ways, enslaved us to a new, insidious tyranny. And that tyranny is the illusion of choice. Let's really unpack that. The illusion of choice. Think about dating apps, for instance. They are, for many, the digital opium of the lonely. We scroll, we swipe, we believe we have an endless buffet of options. But what do the studies actually show? They paint a grim picture. We see that a staggering 70% of men on platforms like Tinder are effectively competing for the attention of just a mere 20% of women. And the average user, whether male or female, is swiping an astonishing 224 times a day. That's not dating, my friends. That's not connection. That's not even true interaction. That's behavioral conditioning. Pure and simple. It's an algorithm designed to keep you engaged, keep you chasing, keep you pressing that lever. And here's the worst part, the truly heartbreaking part. Men know it's rigged. They feel it in their gut. They sense the inherent unfairness, the imbalanced playing field. Yet, like lab rats in a cruel experiment, constantly pressing a lever for the slim chance of a few crumbs, they keep swiping. They keep hoping. They desperately believe that the next match, the next fleeting connection, the next conversation will somehow be the one that fills the ever-widening void left by the last ghosting, the last silent disappearance. It's a vicious cycle, fueled by hope and fed by frustration. De Beauvoir, with her uncanny foresight, saw this coming. Again, in The Second Sex, she observed something profound that still rings true today. Man is defined as a human being and woman as a female. Whenever she behaves as a human being, she is said to imitate the male. Now, let's translate that into the context of modern relationships, especially for men. It means that modern love hasn't truly freed men from societal expectations. In many ways, it has doubled the burden. Think about the contradictory demands placed on men today within the romantic sphere. Be vulnerable but never weak. Be ambitious and driven, but always be available for her needs. Be a protector but never, ever possessive. These aren't just suggestions. They are the unwritten rules of engagement, the impossible tightrope men are expected to walk. The pressure is immense, the contradictions exhausting. You might think this is a new phenomenon, a product of our hyper-connected, social media-driven world. But let me take you back, far back to 12th century France, the very birthplace of what we know as courtly love. Knights, clad in shining armor, would pledge their undying devotion to noble women. They'd compose exquisite poetry, fight epic duels in their honor, worship them from afar, often never even daring to touch them. Sounds incredibly romantic, doesn't it? The pinnacle of chivalry and pure devotion. But here's the often overlooked truth. It was a trap. These noble women were, almost without exception, already married to wealthy, powerful lords. The knights. They were expendable. Their love was a performance, a carefully orchestrated script written to keep them striving, suffering, and expending their energy and resources, all for a love that was fundamentally unattainable. It kept them occupied, valorized their suffering, and ensured they posed no real threat to the established order. Now, fast forward to today. The lords are largely gone. The grand castles have been replaced by carefully curated Instagram profiles, dazzling with filtered perfection. And the knights. They're still here. They're burning money on expensive dates that lead nowhere. They're burning hours, sometimes days, on endless text exchanges that fizzle into silence. And worst of all, they're burning out quietly, in the lonely silence of their own frustration. The game has changed its form, but the underlying dynamic, that pattern of unattainable desire and unrewarded effort, remains eerily similar. Here's what almost no one tells you, the inconvenient truth beneath the glossy facade. Love, as we've been sold it, isn't just difficult. It's often designed to fail. It's built on a foundation of unrealistic expectations and contradictory demands. De Beauvoir knew this with an almost painful clarity. She didn't just theorize about it, she lived it. For 51 years, she and Jean-Paul Sartre maintained one of history's most famous open relationships. A partnership that was supposedly built on radical honesty and absolute autonomy. On paper, it was the ultimate expression of liberated love. But here's the catch, the heartbreaking confession from her private letters. She was miserable. Despite the intellectual purity of their arrangement, she confessed, "I am torn between the desire to possess and the terror of being possessed." And that, my friends, is the insidious curse of modern love, especially for men. We want to own without being owned. We want to need without appearing needy. We want to love without risking loss, without risking that profound, soul-crushing pain. But here's the raw, undeniable truth. Love is inherently risk. It demands vulnerability. It demands surrender. It demands the willingness to feel everything, including the potential for heartbreak. And until men truly confront that truth, until they are willing to step into that risk, they will remain prisoners of a game they never truly agreed to play, a game that keeps them constantly chasing, constantly unsatisfied. Imagine a man right now somewhere in the world sitting in his car. Maybe it's late, maybe it's dark. He's gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles have turned white, the kind of grip that signals a desperate attempt to hold on to something, anything, even if it's just the physical sensation of control. He's replaying that last conversation, the one that just happened, or perhaps the one that haunts him from weeks ago. The one where she said, with that same practiced, almost rehearsed detachment of someone casually returning a sweater they no longer want. It's not you, it's me. He knows, logically, rationally, that it's over. The words were clear. The message received. But his brain, his very being, just won't let go. Why? Why does the mind cling so fiercely to something that's undeniably gone? Because love, real love, the kind that digs in deep and rewires your nervous system, changing the very pathways of your thoughts and feelings, doesn't just hurt when it's taken away. It addicts. And men, perhaps more than anyone else, have been conditioned, over generations, to crave the very pain, the very struggle, the very unattainable chase that ultimately destroys them. Simone de Beauvoir understood this dynamic better than most. She was a keen observer of human nature, and she watched the men in her life, from Sartre, her lifelong intellectual partner, to her various lovers, to her students, fall into the same insidious trap. It was the deeply ingrained belief that suffering for love was somehow noble, that the deeper the wound, the more profound the sacrifice, the purer and more authentic the emotion must be. We see it everywhere, this romanticization of pain. But here's the raw, uncomfortable truth she uncovered, a truth that might sting but needs to be heard. Men don't fall in love. They often fall into trauma loops. Let me tell you a story. It's one you'll recognize instantly. Maybe it's your story. Maybe it's the story of a friend, or someone you once were. A man meets a woman. She's radiant. She's unpredictable. There's a wild, untamed quality to her, a vibrant aliveness that makes his structured, disciplined, perhaps even sterile life feel dull by comparison. She pulls him in with a rush of warmth, with intense connection, with a feeling of being truly seen. Then, just as suddenly, she pushes him away with silence, with distance, with an almost imperceptible chill. He scrambles. His nervous system, now wired for her presence, panics. He scrambles to fix it, to prove himself worthy again, to earn back the affection that felt so freely given just moments before. He believes, with absolute certainty, that if he just tries harder, if he just does something, she'll return to that initial warmth. And then the cycle repeats. Hot and cold. Reward and punishment. Closeness, then withdrawal. And every single time she pulls away, every time she creates that distance, his brain does something truly sinister. It rationalizes the pain. It tells him, if I just love her harder, if I just suffer enough, if I just persist through this, she'll stay. She'll see. This becomes the core of the trauma loop. De Beauvoir called this the slavery of devotion. In The Second Sex, she wrote, the man who is loved is always the master, the woman who loves is always the slave. Now, for decades, this quote has been interpreted through a specific lens, often highlighting a power imbalance where women are the ones who suffer in love. But here's the twist, the modern irony that de Beauvoir, if alive today, would surely point out. Modern men aren't truly masters in this dynamic. Far too often, they're the willing slaves. They've been sold a pervasive, insidious lie. The lie that if they suffer enough, if they sacrifice enough of themselves, if they lose themselves completely in the pursuit of this love, they will finally be rewarded with the connection they crave. And when it doesn't work, when the cycle inevitably breaks or repeats in a painful way, they don't blame the system that set them up for failure. No, tragically, they blame themselves. I wasn't good enough. I didn't try hard enough. I messed it up. This self-blame reinforces the loop, making them even more susceptible to the next one. There's a well-known term for this in psychology: intermittent reinforcement. It's the same powerful mechanism that keeps gamblers glued to slot machines for hours on end. You pull the lever. Sometimes you win a small payout, a burst of lights and sounds. Most times you lose. But it's that uncertainty of the reward, the unpredictable timing of the win, that hooks you. It makes your brain constantly chase the next hit, convinced that this time will be the one. Now, apply that same brutal logic to modern dating and relationships. A woman texts back immediately one day, full of warmth and engagement. Then she ghosts for 3 days, or a week, or silently vanishes entirely. She's affectionate, loving, intimate in private. But then she's distant, perhaps even dismissive in public. She says, "I love you" with passionate intensity in bed, making you feel like the center of her universe, then forgets your birthday a month later. And men. They chase the high. They dissect every mixed signal, every fleeting gesture of affection. They replay every moment of tenderness 1,000 times in their heads, searching for meaning, for a pattern, for validation. And like addicts, in that desperate pursuit of another hit of that good feeling, they endure the crushing lows, the anxiety, the confusion, the self-doubt. They become prisoners of the unpredictable reward. De Beauvoir, in her own life, saw this dynamic play out vividly. Sartre, her lifelong intellectual partner, was notorious for his numerous affairs. He would leave her for younger women, often publicly, then return to her when he grew bored, or perhaps when the novelty wore off. And every single time, de Beauvoir took him back. Why? Because even the sharpest minds, even those who preach radical freedom and autonomy, can be blinded by the deeply ingrained belief that love, real love, must somehow involve pain to be authentic. That suffering is a testament to its depth. This isn't a new sickness. It's an ancient one, deeply rooted in human history and perpetuated by countless narratives. Take the troubadours of medieval Europe. These were poet-musicians who would literally starve, freeze, and even die for the love of women they would never touch. Their suffering, their unrequited longing, was not seen as tragic or foolish. It was romanticized, immortalized in art, elevated to a pinnacle of devotion. Or consider the samurai of feudal Japan, who would perform seppuku, ritual disembowelment, not just for honor, but often for the unbearable pain of unrequited love. Their deaths were celebrated as the ultimate act of devotion, the purest expression of passion. Fast forward to today, and men are still martyring themselves, just in far subtler, more insidious ways. They work soul-crushing jobs they hate, just to afford expensive dates that lead nowhere. They swallow their pride, silence their deepest needs, and avoid expressing any vulnerability to avoid being labeled insecure or needy. They hide their pain, their frustration, their disillusionment. And the worst part? They think this is strength. They believe this silent suffering, this self-erasure, makes them desirable, makes them worthy of love. De Beauvoir warned us, decades ago, about the dangers of societal definitions. She wrote, "Man is defined as a human being and woman as a female. Whenever she behaves as a human being, she is said to imitate the male." Her point was that women, to be seen as fully human, often had to adopt masculine traits. But what happens when men, in their pursuit of love and acceptance, start imitating the martyr, the self-sacrificing, endlessly striving figure of historical romantic ideals? They become ghosts. They become shadows of their true selves, losing their authenticity in the process. Here's the hardest truth of all, and it's a truth that can genuinely liberate you. Love shouldn't feel like war. If you are constantly anxious, constantly trying to earn affection that should be freely given, constantly walking on eggshells around someone, terrified of saying or doing the wrong thing, that's not love. That's not a healthy connection. That's trauma bonding. It's a dynamic rooted in fear and anxiety, not genuine affection. De Beauvoir's most radical idea wasn't just about women's liberation. It was about human liberation. It was the idea that love should be a source of life, expansion, and joy, and not a slow, agonizing suicide of the self. But for that to happen, men must do the one thing they have been rigorously trained never to do: walk away from pain. Even if that pain, in the twisted logic of societal conditioning, has been disguised and presented to them as love. But what if the real enemy here isn't women? What if it's not even love itself? Now we peel back another layer. We're about to expose the silent architect of male suffering, the hidden force that profits from your loneliness, your hunger, your endless striving. And here's the most terrifying part. You've been unconsciously worshiping it your entire life. There is a machine. It exists in the shadows, pervasive and powerful, yet you cannot truly see it. But you feel its teeth. Every single day, in countless subtle ways, you feel its influence. This machine lives in the algorithms of your dating apps, meticulously designed to keep you swiping, to keep you chasing. It lives in the carefully crafted plot lines of your favorite romantic movies, whispering promises of a love that rarely exists in reality. It's even in the well-meaning yet often damaging whispered advice from friends who tell you to just be more confident, or just be yourself, without ever addressing the rigged game you're playing. This machine doesn't just exist. It feeds. It feeds on your loneliness. It feeds on your hunger for connection, your deepest desire to be loved. It feeds on your silent desperation, the quiet ache of not being enough. And here's the most terrifying part, the most insidious truth. You have been meticulously trained to worship it. You've been conditioned to believe that its rules are the natural order, that its demands are the path to happiness. This isn't some wild conspiracy theory dreamt up in a dark corner of the internet. No, this is capitalism, pure and simple. Simone de Beauvoir, once again, saw it coming with chilling clarity. In The Second Sex, she wrote, "The oppressor would not be so strong if he did not have accomplices among the oppressed." And men. In this particular game, men are the perfect accomplices. Unwittingly, perhaps, but perfectly. Let me show you how this machine truly works. Every second, somewhere in the world, a man opens his phone. His thumb scrolls and he stares. He stares at a woman's Instagram profile. And what does he see? She is flawless. Sun-kissed skin. Effortless beauty that seems almost otherworldly. A life that glows with an unattainable perfection, filled with exotic travels, perfect brunches, and an endless parade of glamorous moments. He lingers on her profile. He compares himself to the seemingly perfect men in her comments, or the ideal he believes she deserves. And as he scrolls, he feels that familiar gnawing ache. The ache of not being enough. The insidious whisper that tells him he falls short. What he doesn't see, what the machine carefully hides, is the army of stylists, the professional photographers, the endless hours of editing apps that meticulously constructed that flawless image. He doesn't see the carefully calculated financial incentives behind every single like, every follow, every meticulously curated post. All designed with one goal: to keep him hooked, to keep him consuming, to keep him wanting. He doesn't see the intricate web of digital commerce. He just feels the void. And the machine loves the void. Think about it. Dating apps, online platforms, self-help gurus pushing quick fixes. They don't truly profit from your fulfillment. They don't make money when you find a lasting, happy relationship and delete their app. No, they profit from your hunger. The longer you chase, the more frustrated you get, the more likely you are to spend. The more you spend, the more you need to keep chasing. It's a beautifully designed, self-perpetuating loop of consumption and desire. De Beauvoir called this the myth of the eternal feminine, the deeply ingrained idea that women are mystical, ethereal creatures to be won or worshipped, rather than complex human beings to be truly known, understood, and partnered with. But the modern twist is even darker, more manipulative. Women, in this new digital landscape, are no longer just myths. They are products. And men. In this system, men are the ideal consumers. Always wanting, always chasing, always buying into the next promise of fulfillment. This isn't new. We've seen this playbook before. Go back to the 1920s in America. The tobacco industry faced a massive crisis. Women simply didn't smoke. It wasn't considered feminine or socially acceptable. So what did they do? They concocted the infamous Torches of Freedom campaign, paying glamorous actresses to light cigarettes in public, framing smoking not as a vice, but as a symbol of liberation, independence, and modern womanhood. Within a decade, female smokers skyrocketed. They literally sold women on a fantasy that ultimately harmed them, all under the guise of freedom. Now, apply that same insidious strategy to modern dating and relationships. The machine needed men to believe in romantic destiny, in the idea of the one, so it sold them movies where the hero wins the girl through sheer relentless persistence, no matter how many times he's rejected. It needed men to fear being alone, to see singleness not as a choice but as a failure, a tragic indictment of their worth. It needed men to keep spending, to keep investing time and money, so it cleverly turned love into a complex, high-stakes game where, like a casino, the house always wins. And men. They swallowed the lie, hook, line, and sinker. De Beauvoir saw this manipulation clearly, even in her time. She famously stated, "Representation of the world, like the world itself, is the work of men. They describe it from their own point of view, which they confuse with absolute truth." But now, in the digital age, the machine doesn't even need men to describe the world. It describes it for them. It shapes their perceptions, their desires, their very understanding of what love should be. Here's how deep the programming goes, how thoroughly the machine has infiltrated the male psyche. Studies show that men who consume certain types of media regularly begin to prefer unrealistic body types, the kind that exist only in Photoshop and through extensive plastic surgery. Men who binge romantic comedies start to believe that grand, sweeping gestures matter more than quiet consistency, genuine connection, or everyday effort. Men who endlessly scroll Instagram develop a subconscious, deeply ingrained expectation that real women, in real life, should somehow look like filters, eternally posed and perfectly lit. And when reality inevitably doesn't match the unattainable fantasy they've been fed, what happens? They don't blame the machine, the media, or the impossible standards. They blame themselves. If I were just taller, richer, funnier, more confident, then she'd stay. Then she'd love me. It's a self-defeating loop, carefully constructed by the very system that profits from their pain. De Beauvoir, with her fierce intellect, warned us about the dangers of becoming an object. To make oneself an object, to make oneself passive, is a very different thing from being a passive object. Her point was about conscious choice. But the machine doesn't just make men passive. It makes them complicit in their own destruction. It turns them into active participants in a game designed to extract their time, energy, and self-worth. There is only one true way out of this trap. Men must realize that they are not just players in this rigged game. They are the prize. Their self-worth, their authenticity, their inner peace. These are the treasures the machine seeks to diminish and exploit. De Beauvoir's most radical idea, truly, was not just about women's liberation. It was about human liberation. It was the fierce refusal to let any system, any myth, any machine define your worth, dictate your desires, or cage your spirit. And that liberation, that profound act of self-reclamation, begins with one simple, yet incredibly powerful act of defiance. Stop consuming. Start choosing. Stop letting the machine feed you what it wants you to believe. Start actively choosing what aligns with your authentic self. But what happens when a man truly, deeply, finally wakes up to this truth? In this final chapter, we reveal the forbidden truth about love in the modern age, and why the only way to truly win, to truly find fulfillment, is to rewrite the rules entirely. Music swell, then fades slightly as the narrative continues, perhaps a more hopeful but still grounded tone. Imagine a man standing at the edge of a cliff. Not a literal cliff, but a metaphorical one. The wind howls around him, a chilling reminder of the emptiness he's felt. The ground beneath his feet is crumbling unstable, reflecting the fragile foundation of his past relationships. And behind him, in the encroaching darkness, the smoldering ruins of every love, every romantic ideal he's ever believed in, cast long, distorted shadows. He stands there at this precipice, with two stark choices. He can step back, retreat to the familiar wasteland of endlessly chasing, craving, and collapsing into the arms of women who will never truly see him, never truly meet him where he is. Or he can jump. And what waits below isn't death. No. It's something far more terrifying for a man who has been conditioned to seek comfort and external validation. It's freedom. Simone de Beauvoir understood this pivotal moment perfectly. She called it the moral choice. The instant when a man truly realizes he has been living a script written by someone else, a narrative not of his own making. And in that moment of profound realization, he decides, with a violent, liberating force, to tear that script to pieces. This, my friends, is where the real story begins. The story of a man reclaiming his power. Let me tell you about a man you know. Maybe he's you. Maybe he's someone you once were, or someone you see reflected in the struggles of your friends. For years, he spent his life believing in the one. He thought love was a complex puzzle, a grand equation, and if he just assembled the right pieces, the right job, the perfect body, the ideal amount of charm, the witty banter, he would finally unlock the happy ending he deserved. He devoured the books. He watched every romantic comedy. He absorbed every seductive lie the machine fed him about grand gestures, soulmates, and destined connections. And then, one day, it happened. He met her. And she seemed perfect. She laughed at all his jokes, even the lame ones. She touched his arm in that way that sent a jolt down his spine, making his pulse spike. She mirrored his passions with an almost eerie precision, making him feel like they were two halves of a whole. He was absolutely sure. This was it. This was the one. 6 months later, she left. No warning. No dramatic fight. Just a quiet, surgical extraction from his life, as if she had been practicing the exit for months, perfecting the detachment. Here's what he didn't understand, the truth that would have saved him so much pain. She wasn't the villain. The story was. De Beauvoir, in her piercing analysis, wrote, "Love is not a relation between two people, but a battle between two fantasies." And men. They have been fighting that battle with imaginary weapons, wielding false beliefs against an enemy that doesn't even exist. Let's perform an autopsy on the corpse of romantic idealism, dissecting what you've been fed, and why it's been nothing but poison. Lie number 1. If you love her enough, she'll stay. History, both personal and grand, is littered with the tragic figures of men who loved too much, loved in a way that destroyed them rather than sustained them. Think of Van Gogh, who famously cut off his ear for a woman who publicly mocked him. Or Leo Tolstoy, the literary genius who abandoned his brilliance, his entire life's work, in a desperate, ultimately futile attempt to please his demanding wife, dying miserably while fleeing his own home in the middle of winter. De Beauvoir saw this exact sickness in Sartre. Despite his powerful philosophy of radical freedom and existentialism, he was, ironically, utterly enslaved to the constant need for female validation, hopping from affair to affair like a man desperately trying to outrun his own emptiness. The truth. Love is not a currency. You cannot save up enough devotion, enough sacrifice, enough effort to purchase loyalty or guarantee someone's presence. It simply doesn't work that way. Lie number 2. The right woman will complete you. This, perhaps, is the most insidious lie of all. It's the deeply ingrained idea that a man is somehow unfinished, a half-being, until a woman chooses him, validates him, and makes him whole. This belief twists love into a desperate quest for external validation rather than a partnership of two already complete equals. De Beauvoir rejected this utterly and fiercely. To be truly complete, she argued, one must first be whole within oneself. A man who seeks completion in a woman doesn't find a lover. He finds a crutch. And crutches, no matter how comforting, will always limit your ability to walk on your own. Lie number 3. Love should be effortless. The machine has meticulously sold you this fantasy, packaging it in 1,000 different forms. Romantic comedies, pop songs with saccharine lyrics, Instagram captions filled with perfect, filter-enhanced couples, all whispering the same seductive lie. When it's real, it's easy. That's the most dangerous illusion of all. The truth, the gritty, beautiful, demanding truth, is this: real love isn't effortless. It's conscious. It's a daily choice. It's a continuous negotiation between two autonomous beings who, crucially, refuse to vanish into each other, who maintain their individuality even as they merge. De Beauvoir and Sartre understood this better than most. Their relationship was often messy, frequently painful, sometimes even cruel. But it was undeniably real precisely because they didn't hide from the work. They didn't shy away from the brutal honesty or the challenging negotiations. Most men never learn this. They chase the initial high of infatuation, the effortless honeymoon phase, then panic and retreat when the real work of building a relationship begins. So, here it is. The secret no one wants you to know, the truth that will fundamentally change how you approach love and life. Love is not about finding. It's about building. And before you can even begin to build it with someone else, with another human being, you must first, unequivocally, build yourself. De Beauvoir called this authenticity, the act of becoming a man who doesn't need love to feel alive, but rather chooses it to feel even more alive, to expand his already full existence. This is the man who doesn't chase. He attracts. This is the man who doesn't beg for attention or validation. He selects, carefully and consciously, based on alignment and mutual respect. This is the man who doesn't lose himself in love. He finds himself there, deepened and enriched by the connection, yet always anchored to his own core. Here's how to become that man. It starts today. 1. Embrace the void. Most men run from solitude, from silence, from being truly alone with themselves. They fill it with distractions, with noise, with the constant pursuit of external validation. because they fear what they'll find there. The emptiness, the questions, the pain. Stop running. Sit with it. Let the silence teach you who you truly are when no one is watching, when no one is applauding, when no one is validating. This is where your true self emerges. 2. Choose, don't chase. Reorient your entire approach to dating and relationships. Most relationships begin with a man auditioning for a woman's attention, constantly seeking to prove his worth. Reverse that dynamic. Understand this fundamental truth. You are the prize. You are the one with standards. You are the one who decides if she meets your criteria, if she aligns with your vision for a fulfilling life. This isn't about arrogance. It's about self-respect and establishing a clear boundary of your own worth. 3. Love like a philosopher. De Beauvoir didn't believe in the fluffy, unconditional love peddled by rom-coms. She believed in chosen love, the kind that demands accountability, mutual respect, and a commitment to mutual growth, even when it's uncomfortable. Adopt the same clear-eyed ruthlessness in your own relationships. If it doesn't serve your growth, if it diminishes your authenticity, it's not truly love. Back to the cliff. The man hesitates. The wind screams behind him, carrying the echoes of his past failures. The ruins whisper familiar, seductive lies. What if the next one is different? What if you're just not trying hard enough? He takes a deep breath, closes his eyes, and then he jumps. For a moment, there is nothing but falling. The terrifying, exhilarating sensation of letting go of everything familiar. And then impact. Not the shattering he expected, not the destruction he feared, but something else entirely. Solid ground. The fall wasn't death. It was birth. It was the birth of his authentic self, unburdened by the illusions of the past. De Beauvoir said it best, one is not born but rather becomes a man. This is how you become that man. This is how you reclaim your power. Drop "liberate" in the comments below, because the first step to truly breaking the chains is admitting they exist, and then with courage and defiance, choosing to break free.